Twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome actually occurs in identical twin pregnancies. Identical twin pregnancies themselves are very rare, but depending on when the egg is fertilized and when it splits, it's whether or not the babies will be in the same sac, separate sacs, have separate placentas, or the same placentas. So essentially what happens is, because they're in the two separate sacs and they're sharing that same placenta, there could be issues with them getting nutrients.
There's called a recipient and a donor, and the donor is giving fluids to the recipient, and the recipient's just getting nice and chunky and big from all these fluids, and of course the donor is getting nice and small because he's giving everything to his brother, and you know that's life-threatening for the donor, but that's life-threatening for the recipient as well, because his brain can get overwhelmed by the blood and by these fluids, and the recipient can and will die off, and that complicates the donor will die off, and that complicates the recipient, because the recipient will be attached to basically an empty umbilical cord, and he will die too if they don't catch it. Like if they catch it, they might be able to save him, but it's just very touch and go, very complicated. You never know. You know your babies are going to be born early, you just never know how early and what point that they're going to be pushed to before they're delivered.
I had had a few visits with my doctor, and I went in and they did another ultrasound, and he was really concerned that something was wrong. We knew that the twins were identical. Well, how he explained it was that they had two separate amniotic sacs, but they were sharing a placenta, and that put us at very high risk for twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. So he explained that he was going to need, he would continue on with my care, but that he was also going to send me to a high-risk specialist just to kind of follow my case. So I actually went to see her when I was only 12 weeks pregnant. So after the doctor explained to us what could be going on with the babies, she suggested that we go for an amniocentesis. She wanted that so that they can find out whether it was twin-to-twin or whether it was some type of genetic disorder. She essentially told us that the reason we would want to do genetic testing is to determine what was wrong with the babies, and that if it was something like twin-to-twin, we may want to abort the pregnancy. I made it very, very clear to her that I knew that these babies were a gift from God. We were meant to have these two babies. No matter what was wrong with them, we were going to love them, we were going to take care of them. They were our gift, and we knew that we were committed to this pregnancy. And it was very amazing after that. You know, she turned around and she said to me, "From your mouth to God's ears, and we will do everything we can to help you have some healthy babies."
My husband came home from Iraq, which was awesome. Thank God for that. And 2 weeks later, I was pregnant, and I've been told it's a common post-deployment diagnosis, so that's awesome. And we were going for our first ultrasound, which 2 hours before the ultrasound is when I officially found out I was an epileptic. And then we went to the ultrasound, and we also found out we were having twins. So yeah, that was an awesome experience as well. Quite a shock. They sent me right away to a specialist. They noticed, well, I think they noticed that one baby was smaller than the other baby, to be quite honest. But I did have this new diagnosis of epilepsy, and there were different medications we were going to be trying. I was pregnant. We wanted to be safe, so I started seeing a specialist. I had had a few ultrasounds at the time, but this ultrasound took a long time. You know, he came in, he looked, he left. He came in, he looked, he left, and it wasn't painting a pretty picture in my brain. And then he took me aside and he explained everything that was going on. It was very shocking. He told me my babies probably had twin-to-twin transfusion. It was too early to tell, and being that it was 12 weeks, he did not think it was going to work, and he did recommend one of the ways to remedy this was to abort one or both of the babies. And that would probably be a good option for me to consider. And I immediately told him, that's ludicrous. We're not doing that. I have a God. He's bigger than this medical problem. He's bigger than this situation that's going on, and he's going to handle this for me. I don't know how, but he's going to handle this for me.
As soon as I found out it was twin-to-twin transfusion, I was obviously very upset, and I knew I just had to pick up the phone. So I picked up the phone and I called Jill. And I told her, you know, what had been going on and how upset I was about this. And she said to me, "You have to call Barbara." So I called Barbara that afternoon, and I told her all about it, and she put me in contact with Premier Services. And I would say not even 2 hours passed, and I received a call from Mike Glenn.
Having that support from Premier, you know, people talking, people emailing, texting, everything else, the outside world coming into her from Premier, and people out, you know, reaching out to her, was immense. And it really helped us get through all of it.
I think God's hand was in it for multiple reasons. One, for Jamie and Eric to keep lifting them up, to just let them know that there is positive outcome possible through all this.
I was put on the prayer list with Premier Designs just because the pregnancy was so complicated, and a man named Mike began to get involved, and I had set up what's called a care pages, which is just kind of information about your pregnancy, like a blog, and he got hooked up with that. He would call me, check on me, how are you doing, how's things going now, I read this on your blog, and basically that's how Mike and I got connected.
I think it's fantastic that Premier Designs has a prayer department. It really says a lot about the heart of the company, that they care about their jewelers and their families that much, that they have people dedicated to pray.
I was a perfect candidate for a surgery that we were going to go through to correct the placenta, to correct the cords that were connected in the placenta where they were pushing fluids back and forth to each other. And I met with them once to go over these details, and we came back to Rochester. Then the next week we went back to Cincinnati expecting to have this surgery. When I came back in, they checked my levels, they checked everything, and the third year resident was just amazed. He was astonished. He was like, "You're fine." He's like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "You still have problems." Okay, the baby still had problems, but he's like, it's amazing. We don't have to do the surgery. It's corrected itself enough. Now we just got to worry about the placenta insufficiency. So after the boys were born, the final weights, Jeffrey was 3 pounds and 12 ounces, and Braden was 1 pound, 13 ounces.
I just looked at Eric and I said, I think it's time. I think these babies are gonna come. And the first thing that came to my mind was, oh my gosh, all of the girls are together at training. I need them to pray for me. So I sent out an SOS text to Jill and I said, need prayers now. The babies are having issues. Jacob had a deceleration. I think they're gonna be born tomorrow. And they just started praying for me. She said they all got together right there in that room. Training had just ended and they all prayed. They wheeled me into the delivery room. And at 8:11 p.m. on July 27th, we had 2 little boys. I was laying there so sick to my stomach, I kept telling Eric, oh my gosh, I think I'm gonna throw up. And then I heard Joshua cry. And it was the most amazing sound ever. And then 11 seconds later, although to me it felt like hours, Jacob was born and he cried as well. And it was just beautiful. I knew I had been so tired. I had been so stressed out. I hadn't slept in days. I just looked at Eric and I said, God is so good. He is taking care of our boys. Go with them. Go to the NICU. Be with them. They are going to be absolutely fine. They are in God's hands. I'm going to be fine. Joshua weighed 2 pounds, 10 ounces, and Jacob was a little bit smaller at 2 pounds, 1 ounce. Mike and the prayer services group followed me throughout my pregnancy and throughout the delivery of the boys very, very closely. It wasn't long after the boys were born that Mike gave me a call. He picked up the phone and he told me that a name of another jeweler had come across his desk and that this jeweler also had twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome. She had boys who were about 6 months older than Jacob and Joshua, and that our stories were so very similar. Looking at Christy's care pages definitely gave me so much hope. It let me know that, kind of what to expect, kind of what path we were going to walk through, and then that she had been there, that God had taken such good care of them, and that He had a similar plan for us.
And just these past 2 months, getting to know her over the phone and talking with her, it's been such a blessing for me to be like, oh my goodness, you went through that too? Oh, thank God I'm not alone. And oh my goodness, you had this happen with your boys. Oh, me too, and this is what I did. And she'd be like, well, this is what I did. And we're like, oh my goodness, that's the same thing. And just the things that we shared in common, it was incredible.
These 2 girls have just an amazing story together. And the fact that they're both jewelers and they both had boys and they're all 4 healthy and beautiful and thriving is just a miracle.
I think the connection between Christy and Jamie is ultimately just God's sovereignty. I think one of the reasons why we may have gone through what we've gone through was to be a help and encouragement to Jamie and her family.
I know for certain that God placed her in my life. He knew that I needed that inspiration, that I needed someone who was strong and faithful and had walked that journey before me. I love talking to Christy. We text way too much. I'm always talking to Christy. I am so excited. She is actually going to be my roommate at Rally this year, and I cannot wait to finally meet her in person. I really look forward to the day when our families can get together and Braden and Jeffrey can meet Jacob and Joshua. I think that we are going to be friends for a very long time to come.